The problem we have here is this whole thing that it will be sold at a reasonable rate. So that means that reasonable rate is not open market value. So who is going to determine what that reasonable rate is, and what will that reasonable rate be? So under new legislation, tenants have a right to buy their rental property. Let's look at what this means for buy-to-let investors and landlords. I'm joined as usual by Andrew Roberts. The lefties are in the asylum again.
I want to go home.
Now this is something that Jeremy Corbyn had in his manifesto, and he said in 2019 that tenants should have a right to buy, and he said it would be at a discount. So he wanted to have the same sort of right that council tenants had to buy council houses at a discount. He wanted that to be in the private rented sector. Now the interesting thing about what the government's proposing is they're saying tenants will have the right to buy their rental property at a reasonable rate. What does that mean?
Well, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, Corbyn, Starmer, they've all come at this as though they're Margaret Thatcher with the right to buy your council house, and because you've been an occupier of that council house for a period of time, you can buy it at a discount. The thing is, the mortgages that people took out were not taken out at a time when a valuer would come in and go, well, actually, because this person could buy this property in a year's time or 2 years' time at a discount from you, we'll only give you the discounted value of that mortgage right now. This is complete baloney. It's theft. Stop stealing.
It is basically theft. It goes against the whole capitalist system. It goes against the rules of law. I think there'll be lots of legal challenges to this as well. But there is not a problem here, because it happens all the time that tenants buy their properties from landlords. If there's a willing buyer and a willing seller at an agreed price, that is something the state does not have to intervene in. It'll happen naturally. The problem we have here is this whole thing that it will be sold at a reasonable rate. So that means that reasonable rate is not open market value. So who is going to determine what that reasonable rate is, and what will that reasonable rate be? And will it be at a discount to market value? And how much of a discount to market value will that be?
I mean, it brings in so many points here, Ranjan. I mean, my head is going... And as most of you know, I can process lots of data very quickly, but this is starting to fry my head, because how does the mortgage company value this? What happens if somebody is told they can buy it at a reasonable rate, but that happens to be below the value of the mortgage that you have on the property? What happens if a valuer turns out? Is this another Red Book valuation assumption that needs to be created to actually work out what a value is on the open market, what a value is if sold under forced circumstances, what happens if it's sold to a tenant? Hang on. How do we come up with these assumptions? This is crazy. My head's frying. I must have about 100 questions on this. Drop your questions below, because see if they're the same as mine. I'm frying.
And also, is this a new strategy for first-time buyers? I mean, should a first-time buyer rent a property they're looking to buy, and then after a qualifying period, hang your clothes out and get a bit of damp going, unscrew the kitchen door handles and stuff like that, make it look a bit of a mess. When the valuer comes to determine reasonable rate, get the lowest valuation possible, and then jump in for the 5% mortgage guarantee scheme they're bringing in, pick it up at a steal, and then flip it on the next day, back to back.
Do you know what? That's a great property strategy. I think I might take that one out myself.
I mean, that could be what's happening here. I mean, there's just a robbing of value here.
Yeah.
Now, there must be safeguards to prevent robbing of value in that way.
I haven't seen any proposed.
But the other issues are, I mean, of course, things like HMO property, you can't buy a room. A room is not saleable, so those will be exempt. But I do think that, again, we've talked about this before, if you're dealing with single family housing and single family tenants rather than groups of sharers and that kind of stuff, then you are going to be more exposed. Those houses you may have to sell on. But if you're dealing with multi-unit properties, there are ways of protecting your interests. It is going to be very hard. We talk a lot about converting commercial buildings to residential use. If you've got, say, a block of 10 apartments, it is going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for a tenant to say, you know what, I want to buy flat number 7. Because for one, the title exists as a whole for the freehold, and the lending will be on the whole of the building. So it's not something, you're not living in a unit that's actually available for sale, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And, from the point of view of those sorts of exercises where a tenant in flat 7, as you mentioned, wants to buy their flat, who pays the cost to create the breakup of the freehold into multiple leaseholds? Who covers the costs of a mortgage redemption so that you can now have mortgages on each and every individual flat? This is not covered within the legislation. So it's quite a nutty one to get your head around. And I think it might be a strategy where we actually retain that as a strategy to prevent the property being taken over.
I personally think that multi-unit buildings, whether it's HMOs or mixed-use commercial residentials, mixed-use or blocks of flats, this legislation won't apply because of the can of worms that unfolds. So as we've discussed, I mean, it is going to affect single-family units that you've got in your portfolio. And I think the big problem I have is this reasonable rate thing. So, let's say you've done the typical homes under the hammer type of deal. You've bought a property, you've spent some money and refurbished it, and then you've let it out. So you have a profit there for your risk, your hard work, your investment, your gut feel that you've acted on. And then someone lives in it for a year, buys it as a reasonable rate. So that uplift that you have generated just gets robbed. Where is the equity and fairness in that?
Isn't that the country that we live in? It's all about take from the rich and give to the poor. That's what I think, isn't it?
Well,
have I got that wrong, Ranjan?
It's take from the... no, I would argue it takes from the people that have got off their backside and taken entrepreneurial risk, and giving it to people who are taking no risk. And are just sitting there and taking it as a benefit.
This policy is about a transference of wealth from those who create wealth to those who can't be bothered. They're sofa surfers. But
rest assured, this is a policy that's going to have legal challenges, and they are going to be a lot of loopholes and a lot of workarounds that if you stay tuned to this channel and you subscribe, hit the bell icon, follow us, we will keep you up to date with in the coming months.
The other way you can actually keep yourself up to date on this particular topic is join us every month at the Baker Street Property Meet, where we will be keeping you informed and up to date on the changing policies as they happen. And we also host a Q&A session where you can take your questions and we will answer them with our panel of experts that we bring in every single month. So join us end of the month, bakerstreetpropertymeet.com. We also socialise in the bar afterwards so we can enjoy sharing a drink with you and answering your questions. Look forward to seeing you there.
And when you come to Baker Street, we start at 6 p.m, we finish at 10 p.m, and basically you're out. You can't buy the venue.